that at the moment there's about 110 of you joined us. My name is Sean Dooley. I am basically I have to confess I'm a hardcore bird watcher, but also an author of books on birding, such as The Big Twitch and Anoraks to Zitting Cisticola, a whole lot of stuff about bird watching. And I'm also currently the National Public Affairs Manager at Birdlife Australia. And I would like to welcome everybody, all 115 of you, it looks like, for coming out on such a cold night tonight. I suppose that's one good thing about the new world that we face. We haven't had to rug up and find a park and then battle through the chilly winds to get here. So but thank you for coming out tonight, virtually at least. And on behalf of Geelong Regional Library Corporation, I'd like to welcome you to this author event that the library are running many of, and it's a fascinating and wonderful program, so get on board with other events such as this. The Geelong Regional Library Corporation acknowledges the Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar original owners of the lands on which the library services operate. And I'd like to acknowledge the owners, the Boonwurrung people in the land where I am narrowcasting from tonight. We pay respect to the Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar elders, both past, present and emerging. And we acknowledge and celebrate the First Nations people of this land and as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. And I'd also like to add, as the custodians of the birds, the bird life that the original owners of this land had when Europeans first arrived was in far better shape than it has been in the last 180 years in this part of the world. It looks like we're still going up with attendees. Welcome. We're now up to 132 participants, which is terrific to see. Thank you. And just a few housekeeping reminders in case of emergency. Hopefully you know where the exits are at your place. You can participate in the live webinar tonight by clicking on the Q&A button and typing in any questions or comments that you have, and I'll try and keep track of those. And after we've heard from our guests this evening, we will try and have a bit of a Q&A session at the end and answer as many of those questions as we can. You can also use the chat function if you're using an iPad or iPhone tonight. And so and that's all the housekeeping. I'm really been looking forward to this event. Our guest tonight is, I have really great pleasure in introducing our guest tonight. We have spoken once before at the Melbourne Writers' Festival a couple of years ago. Our guest, Jennifer Ackerman, was out here was it 3 years ago now? Mm-hmm. Three years ago, and we are speaking about, in the Melbourne Writers' Festival, about her stunning and fascinating book, The Genius of Birds, which was an incredible revelation on the intelligence of birds, and completely blew out the water the concept that the idea of the bird brain being a pejorative term. Jennifer she's been writing about science for a long time now, and science, nature, human biology for almost 3 decades. And her books have covered many areas, but interestingly, her last, actually one of her books was about essentially the natural history of the common cold, which with the fabulous title Ah Chew. And however, there's a bit of a theme emerging in Jennifer's work since The Genius of Birds was published. I believe there's been another book, which I haven't had the pleasure of reading, called Birds by the Shore. And now this third book with a bird theme that we're speaking about tonight, the absolutely gripping and just fascinating The Bird Way, which we're speaking about tonight. So I think I've already gone on too long, and we'd much rather hear from Jennifer. Jennifer's joining us tonight from her home in Virginia in the States. And as you can see, she's fit and well and healthy, and despite the hour, Jennifer, before we start, can I just ask what time is it where you're speaking from?
It's a little after 5:30 a.m.
Oh, incredible! She's coming live to you, everybody. That's what I call dedication. Well, firstly, thank you. It's great to see you again. Unfortunately, not in person this time. When we spoke last time, and you ended up on your was it on your book tour that you then spent 6 weeks traveling around Australia, meeting up with a lot of bird researchers?
Yes, that's right.
And as we're probably going to find out in the presentation that Jennifer's going to give us, which is about just roughly 20 minutes, and then we'll come back for more of a discussion. There's a lot for a book written by someone from the Northern Hemisphere. As a birdwatcher in Australia, we often get frustrated that there's a very Northern Hemisphere-centric view traditionally about birds and what they mean. But Jennifer, her 6 weeks in Australia, and I think other trips to Australia, there are so many references to Australian birds here because Australian birds exhibit some remarkable behaviours, and that their lives are extraordinary. And even somebody like myself who's been a bird watcher since I was a little kid, the things I've learnt reading this book in the last week or two has completely blown my mind, and I thought I knew a lot. So anyway, without further ado, I'd hand over to Jennifer because I believe you have a presentation for us.
I do. Thank you so much, Sean. And hi, everyone. Many thanks to the Geelong Library for hosting me, and to Sean for being here with me. You know, I'm a bird watcher, but Sean is a birder. He's a true twitcher, and he's also a brilliant and entertaining writer. So I'm truly delighted to be here with him. And I do wish I could be there with you in Australia in person, to meet you, sign your books, hear your bird stories, and see your incredible birds again. But given the circumstances, this is a really wonderful opportunity, and I'm so grateful for it. So I'm going to talk about the Birdway for 20 or 25 minutes and show you some of the birds in the book, and then join Sean in conversation and Q&A.
So that was extraordinary, those images, and to accompany the words that you were expressing from the book. Remarkable. It was really exciting, and for those of us, those in Geelong can maybe get out a bit more, but those of us in Melbourne were kind of fairly confined. It was a case of just feeling incredibly jealous that we can't get out and see lots of those birds at the moment. But as you say, and birds have things to teach us. So, and we're certainly seeing people connecting to birds in almost, dare I say it, unprecedented ways and numbers over the last few months. We might talk about that a bit later, but I'd like to, thank you again. I really love watching that. But also I wanted to begin our discussion, and I said there's lots of questions, so we'll keep our discussion fairly brief, but when you wrote The Genius of Birds, was focusing on bird intelligence, and I guess if we ever needed any proof of bird intelligence, I saw in the news today that a rhea, which is the South American version of an emu, attacked the President Bolsonaro, was doing some photo op, and I'm thinking back to that bald eagle that attacked Donald Trump a while back, and now in these COVID times, I think the birds, we should be listening to the birds. They're
well done.
They're a good judge of character. But this also, I saw today there was a story out about Irene Pepperberg's research with her new parrot. The old parrot Alex unfortunately died quite a few years ago, and her new bird that she's worked with, I think it's called Griffin.
Griffin, yes.
Have you met Griffin or Irene?
I've met Griffin, but I've seen what Griffin can do, and he is every bit as smart as Alex. He's showing us all kinds of new capabilities of African greys.
Yeah, they had the story that I read today, coincidentally, was they put Griffin against, I think it was 21 Harvard students from all different backgrounds and did the old pea and thimble trick. And I think basically Griffin was able to get a better result at predicting where the coloured thimble would be in which cup than I think it was something like 80% of the Harvard students. So, you know, if you need any more examples of bird intelligence, look no further.
That's absolutely right. And it's one of those, you know, spatial memory abilities that just, you know, we don't even come close.
And so after having finished Genius of Birds, like it was such an authoritative look at what we've learned about birds. Was it this sort of new research that keeps coming out that prompted you to want to delve further into the topic of that ended up being the book, The Bird Way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, every time I picked up a magazine or you know, heard from a scientist, there's just so much new research going on, and I think we're really in the middle of a kind of revolution of our understanding of the minds of other animals, and birds are such a big piece of that progress. And it's you know, it's partly that we are, you know, taking these new approaches and we have these new tools, but there's just an explosion of information about what birds can do.
Mm. And it's interesting you touched on the fact that, and actually I touched on it too at the start, that the traditional ornithological orthodoxy had very fixed views of what birds were up until really the last 20 years. I suppose there's been a revolution in genetic technology and, you know, image resonating to study birds' brains and other things. But it's really interesting that that view has changed, as you were saying, when the diversity of researchers began to change. I noticed in Tim Lowe, who's got a quote on the front cover of your book, in his fabulous book, Where Song Began, he looked at that from the, as I was joking at the start about the Northern Hemisphere centric ornithology studies, which looked pretty much exclusively at songbirds in terms of males establishing territories and singing, and not realizing that without that wider view, that diversity of species, that basically those northern hemisphere songbirds are sort of in the minority in the terms of the way birds mate and establish territories and things like that. Is that do you think we would have got to this point if we hadn't sort of expanded the types of people that were getting into ornithological studies?
Well, I wonder. I mean, one of the big shifts has been how many more women ornithologists there are. And, you know, the study about the new information about female birdsong has really depended on an international team of women scientists who are looking at birdsong. And, you know, I grew up with the idea, and then it's a very Northern Hemisphere bias, and that it's primarily male birds that sing complex songs, you know, that females just don't have song in that same way. And it's not true. It's when this international team of women scientists looked at, you know, more than 1,000 species, they realized that 2/3 of female songbirds in 2/3 of the species, females sing too, and they sing songs that are just as complex as male songs and for similar purposes. So I'm not sure we would have reached this this point without these women ornithologists. And the same is true for the, you know, the sort of geographical slant. You know, when you get researchers from Australia, from South America, working in their own areas, you're going to see things in a new way. And I think that's, thank goodness that we've moved on from that Northern Hemisphere bias.
There's actually a fantastic article out in the latest Australian Birdlife magazine about female lyrebirds and their song. And this new research by Vicky Austin is showing that, I'm not sure if you've seen this or not, showing that the female song of the lyrebird is every bit as complex and also has mimicry, which I had heard myself. And when I first saw a female mimicking birds, I was thinking, my first thought was, oh, it must be an immature male just practicing. But they've worked out that they quite possibly developed the mimicry, but for other purposes. And it's almost like the males came to the party late and started using it to try and impress the females. And I'm really interested in, you touched on, I think it was when you were talking about the bowerbirds, but you touched on how how that we often think the male display is all about the male getting to choose the female, but you mentioned that it's female driven, that sort of thing. Can you explain that a bit further?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the female lyrebird for a minute, because the many of the species that they mimic, they're mimicking their alarm calls, and then females are using those mimicked alarm calls to keep other birds, predators and competing female lyrebirds away from their breeding territory. So, you know, the female has complete responsibility for raising her egg and her young. And so she uses mimicry of alarm calls in a different way than males do. And yeah, so the shaping of those wild and crazy courtship displays, those are really, they're shaped by females through sexual selection, through, you know, the females drive the performance of the males, and they mate with the male that has the, you know, the best, weirdest, most wonderful display, whether it's a bowerbird's, you know, collection of objects, or its ability to dance and mimic. The female likes these traits, and so she will mate with the male that has the most skilled demonstration of those displays, and so those genes are perpetuated, and so she's really driving the show.
Yeah, I was really struggling. I'm glad you did the presentation you did, because I just didn't know where to start with the book. There's so many instances of different birds, as you said at the start from E.O. Wilson. It's you know, to know one bird is to not know them all. And but there's one thing I would like you to talk to before we go to the questions. And this, I think, of all the mind-blowing things, this is something that blew my mind the most, was the great bowerbird of Northern Australia. You talk about, and I'd already known that the bowerbirds, it's one of the bowerbirds that builds an avenue of sticks or grass, and it designs, and I knew that it used design techniques that are used in architecture today, like it almost has a feature wall and it uses false perspective to make itself look bigger and things like that. But you also, I read in the book that they actually change the female's perception of colour in their bower. Are you able to talk about that? Because I'm still trying to get my head around that. That's incredible.
It's a phenomenon of physics. Basically, it's, you know, the bird creates an environment that changes the female's perception. So she's sitting in the bower watching his display, and he basically crafts the bower, uses color in the bower where she's sitting. So, and it changes her view of what she's seeing on the outside of the bower. So it's really remarkable. And you know, these birds also, you know, they use visual illusion and to make their objects and their own bodies look bigger, and they, you know, they arrange their objects so that the female who's observing them, you know, perceives something that's not really there. It's an illusion.
Yeah, it's quite stunning. And I can say to everyone that hasn't read the book yet, you really have to get a copy of this, because it will change the way you look at birds, even your local common birds. You saw in that presentation Jennifer was showing us Australian magpies, who are one of the most complex and wonderful species going around. We probably I could talk about like all of this all night, but we better get to the questions from our audience. Debbie had a couple of related questions. I'll try and put them all into one for you, Jennifer. She was asking about how far can local neighbourhood birds fly, and also do they recognise or remember where they were born?
Oh, such an interesting question. So it depends on the species. I don't know what your neighborhood birds are, but they probably can go, some distance. Birds definitely do return to their natal grounds. That's kind of a remarkable phenomenon that I first learned about through a bird, the osprey. When I was living on the shore in Delaware, these birds, they fly south to the southern area of South America to winter, and then they come back literally to within feet of where they fledged. And how that little digit of coast is lodged in their minds is just an amazing mystery to me. But I think it is true for many other birds too. And our hummingbirds, they, if you don't put your feeder out in April, where it usually is, these hummingbirds that return from their migrations will go looking for, like, where's my feeder? So there's a lot of, of memory of place. And it's a really, really interesting phenomenon.
And I see you mentioned the rufous hummingbird. I was reading recently that they, not only do they remember each flower in that one bit of habitat, that field, but also they have a really interesting migration strategy. I think it was the rufous hummingbird where they almost have like a second migration that's a western, like in the southwest of America, isn't it? And they go to the more riparian areas where there's almost like a second spring. So they must know, and they stop there and refuel on the way, and then they head to the Amazon or wherever. So they must know that sort of local spatial connection in at least 3 different regions of the world, as well as doing their migration. It boggles the mind to think how their brains handle all that, process that information.
Yeah, it's really true when you think about how, they have these tiny brains and no mobile phones, and yet they're capable of, navigating to very particular places very faithfully. And, they have the mental equivalent of our compasses, our GPS, our satellite navigation. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. There's another question here from Craig, who was asking what your favourite bird is. I think I remember you saying when we spoke last time that, like Kate Pearson from the B-52s, your favourite bird is the black-capped chickadee, and you mentioned it in the talk, but I've got a feeling that it might be nudged out by a certain New Zealand parrot.
Yeah, I have to say the Kia just jumped right up there, and I still am very loyal to my black-capped chickadees, but the Kia is just such an extraordinary bird, and so bold and playful and curious and fascinating that, yeah, I'm afraid the chickadee may have to nudge over for first place.
Belinda has a question, which is an interesting one, about when you're talking about bird calls. And she's seen people using the apps to play the bird calls to attract them in, and wondering, have there been any studies showing whether this causes distress in birds?
Yeah, it's actually very controversial in the bird watching world. And Sean, you may know this too, that doing playback can actually, yes, disturb a bird a great deal. It feels, sometimes they feel like there's competition in the area when there's not, or it may cause a bird to leave a nest, to defend it. So it's not universally loved in the birding world. People love to see the birds, and it's a good way of bringing them out, but it can be disruptive.
Also, I was thinking when you was talking about that, the birds using different notes and different calls to express different meaning is, the apps that people use only have a very small selection of calls. So often I've heard people say the apps don't work, they don't attract birds, but maybe they're just saying the wrong things in the recordings that they've got.
It could be. It could be, you know, that you're broadcasting, stay away.
um, uh, Try and get as many questions as we can in. Lisa mentioned that she's new to birding, but has first noticed New Holland's honeyeaters live at her house. But lucky you, Lisa. Do you think they are interested in us? It's an interesting concept.
Oh, well, possibly. You know, I mean, as you know, in Australia, Australian magpies recognize individual people and, you know, human faces, and will often target the same individual if during the nesting season, a small percentage of magpies. And that's true for our crows here in the US. They're very good at recognizing human faces. And actually, since I've wrote these two books, I've had many stories of people saying, I think the birds in my yard know who I am and know that I feed them. And, you know, and people really feel like they've developed these, at least a recognition relationship. Mutual recognition relationship. It's harder for us to distinguish individual birds within a species. I think they have an easier time with our faces.
Yes, well, certainly I know the work that Daryl Jones has done out of Griffith Uni in Queensland. I think it's something like up to 100 faces a magpie can recognise. They've worked out. I'd love to know how Daryl got 100 people to volunteer to see whether they get swooped or not, but that's another story for another day.
Daryl does brilliant work, and some of it is covered in both the magpie and the brush turkey in the book.
Yeah, this is just more evidence that people need to go out and buy this book and read about all this incredible research around the world. We've got. Well, this is an interesting one from Margaret. What strategies do researchers use to find out what sort of information is being communicated by the birds in their alarm calls?
Well, this is what Jessica McLaughlin does. So she uses a playback call, and she records in detail the responses of all the birds on her, both in audio and in video. And then she goes back, and it's such painstaking work, but she goes through those videos, she slows them down. So she's observing the bird responses to the alarm calls in great detail. And her study was recently published, and it's just really, really brilliant.
Mm. That sounds excellent to find out. We've got almost just going over time, but I think I will indulge everybody. I guess you don't have to go home and pay the babysitter, so we might keep going for just a few more minutes to answer some more of these questions, if that's okay with you, Jennifer.
Absolutely.
We have what was the question? Question about how are birds evolving to deal with climate change? Have you had it all?
That's such a good question, and I think the answer is not simple. I think there are many, many birds that are not capable of evolving to adjust. You know, I think about the lyrebird, and it's, you know, lost 50% of its habitat from the awful fires that you've had, and you know, whether this bird can, you know, find new habitat or adjust is a question. It's the birds that specialize in particular kinds of habitats. I think in particular of birds that live on mountains, and they live at a particular elevation. And when the temperature warms, the elevation moves up the mountain, and pretty soon you're off the top of the mountain and the bird has no habitat at all. Or migratory birds that depend on a particular bloom of food that's timed very specifically with the temperature. And those birds, their signal to leave their wintering grounds may not jive with the bloom of this food at a very important staging source, so they can't get the nutrition they need to get north. So
I think there's a really fascinating study with red knots in Europe, which is happening. They migrate to West Africa, and the chicks aren't getting time to develop well enough, and they're beaks are getting smaller, and they can't, when they get to West Africa, they can't get the dig deep enough to get the type of high energy food that they usually get, the particular shellfish or worm or whatever it is. And I think they've worked out that if they can survive the first year, the chicks do all right, but there's a big attrition rate, and they're evolving, but just not fast enough. So it's you know, I suppose, given what you've written and summarised, you know, birds are so intelligent, have capabilities we were, you know, hitherto unaware of. But you know, even for them, facing something as overwhelming as and rapid as climate change is going to be an enormous challenge.
Right. Absolutely. Habitat loss and climate change.
Yeah, this is actually, that tallies with the question from Carly saying, do you have any major worries for birds? But I suppose you just summed it up there.
Yeah, so many major worries. And also in my country, we're rolling back, the administration is rolling back environmental regulations that have been in place for, you know, half a century, and they were meant to protect birds, and those are no longer in place. And so, you know, as if birds didn't have it hard enough, we're making things harder for them. And yeah, I have a lot of worries.
Yeah, well, actually, this might lead into, I'll try and connect a couple of questions here. Some anonymous attendee said they were interested in bird migration, and I wanted to find out more about it. And certainly for people in the Geelong area, that earlier question about how far do the birds move, we know that small birds like fairy wrens and things don't move very far at all. But in Geelong, you've got all those migratory shorebirds, which, right, the ones that haven't stayed here for the winter are now probably up in the Arctic Circle. Hopefully their chicks are hatching as we speak, and they'll soon be heading back. But so there was that question about where you can witness the migration, but also another question from Leah about how useful or important is citizen science in finding out about birds and for conservation, and also what would you think is the most useful thing that people could do to help birds?
Really great questions. Participating in citizen science is a wonderful way to help, and there are many projects. You can join in you know, backyard feeder counts and all kinds of observational studies, and the data that's coming in from those citizen science projects are invaluable. And so that's a good way. I think also, you know, making known your desire to protect birds to legislators, whether it's through, you know, voting or phone calls or letter writing to letters to the editor. I also encourage people, at least in the States, but it probably would be helpful in Australia too, because we're losing so much habitat, actually planting native species in your area can create a whole ecosystem that is very, very valuable for birds. And you think it's just a little small patch of land, but actually it can make a big difference to birds. So I encourage people to do that as well.
Excellent. I think we've gone a little bit over time. It's probably a good spot to finish there, but just, I guess, getting it back to the personal for a second. Joanne wanted to know, and it might be a good thing to finish at the beginning, what was your spark bird? What was it about birds that got you interested, Jennifer?
Oh gosh, I think my spark bird was probably the white-throated sparrow. When I was growing up with my dad, he was a big birder by ear. And, you know, he learned to bird from a man who was almost blind named Apollo. And so he learned how to bird really through song. And I just remember being just, you know, we would go out very early in the morning before dawn and hear the dawn chorus. And this bird singing just leapt right into my heart.
Was that a white-throated sparrow in your presentation? There was a...
Oh, no, that was a dickcissel.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Not quite up there on my North American birds.
Hey, it's okay.
Well, now that I think we better end it there before you expose my my sham knowledge about birds any further. But I'd just like to thank you for getting up so early tonight, this morning, for you, Jennifer, to indulge us all here in Australia with the vast and amazing knowledge that you've gathered together in this book. And I'd highly recommend that people get out and get a copy of The Bird Way from your local bookstore. Even if you're locked down, you can still order online, and local bookshops, I know in Melbourne, are still delivering books to people. Of course, the Geelong regional libraries have hard copy of the book, and also e-copies in e-books that you can loan out. In the Geelong library itself has reopened, although in a reduced capacity. So go visit the website to see their current opening times at your local branch, and know that we're feeling incredibly jealous that you can go to a library because we're just across the bay and we can't. This discussion has been recorded. The actual presentation of Jennifer's won't be replicated. So if you watch tonight, you're incredibly privileged. But if you want to come back again and listen to what we've been speaking about, you can certainly do that. And you can pass it on to friends and family, and it will be available on the library's website from tomorrow. And while you're on the website, you can check out some of the library's other upcoming events, including Kate Nunn discussing her book, The Silk House, next Wednesday night in this time slot, presumably. So it's, I can see there's lots of chat going on there, and unfortunately we have, you've probably all got to get going. I know the natives are getting restless in my place. They've been fairly quiet for a reasonably long time, but there's pounding at the door. I'm soon going to have young people burst in BBC correspondent style. So we'll wind it up there. Again, thank you from all of us here for coming and joining us today, Jennifer. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And you can relive all the highlights from tonight when you get a copy of the book and read it. So I'm going to wind it up there, and I think I'm the one to finish the session. So again, thanks for attending, and get out there and enjoy your birds, because enjoy them while you can. We've got amazing ones right where we live, even if you're in lockdown. Thank you very much. Keep on twitching.